The Galactic Imperial Council chamber smelled faintly of antiseptic and ego. Carved into the side of an asteroid orbiting the starless void of Sector Chiral 9, the chamber shimmered with artificial gravity, layered holograms of conquered systems, and the constant thrum of bureaucratic dread. High Lord Zethkar of the Narkal Dominion, wearing his ceremonial spine cape and a permanent sneer, tapped a long chitinous claw against the data slate in front of him. It was the universal sign of irritation. Or constipation. With the Narkal, it was hard to tell. "This is not a council meeting," he hissed. "This is a funeral procession dressed as diplomacy." Across the table, Grand Admiral Ixil of the Dustborn Collective wheezed through his thorax. "The Rarmal swarm has taken 6 systems in as many days. If we don't act, we'll all be absorbed into their reproductive biomass by cycle's end. I don't know about you, Zethkar, but I value my individual organs." An awkward silence stretched. Lord Priest Gum of the Mosswalkers gurgled from his corner. "Perhaps we should consider non-traditional reinforcements." The others turned to him. Gum's people were known for their fungal wisdom, slow speech, and unsettling tendency to release spores when anxious. "Define non-traditional," Zethkar said flatly. "Humans," Gum replied. Now came the laughter. The kind that starts as a cough and snowballs into a full-body convulsion. Zethkar doubled over, his armor clicking with mirth. "You want us to summon humans? The species whose most significant export is fermented sugar liquid and short-form media addiction? I watched one get into a fight with their own vending machine." "2 vending machines," Ixil corrected. "He lost both." Gum remained unshaken. "And yet their violence-to-survival ratio is remarkable. They survived their own extinction-level events. Many of them created by themselves. On purpose." A hologram shimmered to life above the table. Scenes from Earth's past. Endless wars. Cities leveled. Leaders smiling while signing death warrants. Holiday mall stampedes. The laughter faded. "Desperate times," Gum said softly. "Desperate measures." They agreed in the way cowards do, quietly, with a pre-written contingency plan to deny everything later. The request was sent. Earth's reply was characteristically brief. "We got you, sugar." Weeks later, the alien dignitaries gathered at Docking Bay 9A of the planetary fortress Kesser Prime. A shuttle, old and rusted but humming with retrofitted charm, descended from orbit with a jaunty, non-military fanfare. Painted on the side in bold, swirling calligraphy were the words, "Peacekeepers, Ladies Edition." The ramp lowered. A line of women marched out, not in step, not in silence. They walked like a bar brawl had taken the shape of lipstick and muscle. 20 of them, all wearing grins. Some chewed gum. One wore aviator sunglasses despite the lack of sun. At their center was Captain Marla Briggs. 5'9" in boots, hair tied back in a messy bun. Marla looked like the kind of woman who could either offer you a fresh-baked pie or knock you unconscious with the pie tin. She stepped forward, smile warm and wide. "Howdy," she drawled. Zethkar blinked. "I was expecting someone taller." She extended a hand, palm open. "Well, shoot. I was expecting someone less scaly, but we don't always get what we want, do we, darlin'?" The translator buzzed. Zethkar glanced at the device. "Did she just insult me?" Marla was already walking past. "No, sugar. I insult folks on purpose. That was just foreplay." The humans were escorted to their quarters, standard military housing, if you ignored the sudden smell of cinnamon, and the fact that one of them had already installed a portable karaoke machine. The alien observers watched in quiet horror as 2 women, Sergeant Val Cruz and Private Lee, arm-wrestled using a live stun grenade as the table leg. That evening, a mission briefing was called. The Rarmal had taken the border world of Stravalin. The Empire had tried and failed to retake it 5 times. One attempt ended with an entire battalion lost after mistaking Rarmal mating calls for distress signals. It was now known, quite graphically, what happened during a Rarmal embrace. The Council's plan was simple. Drop the humans in. Monitor. Observe. Deny responsibility if it went badly. Marla leaned back in her chair, boot resting on the table. So let me get this straight. You're throwing us into a death trap, with zero support, and expecting a miracle. That is the Empire's strategic assessment, yes, replied Admiral Ixil. Marla smiled wider. Sounds like a Friday back home. The drop was scheduled at dawn. The humans suited up, armor modified with personal touches, pink decals, customized visors. One had, "Hell hath no fury," scrawled in lipstick on the chest plate. They loaded into their transport with an unsettling calm. Someone played country music over the comms. The shuttle dropped through Stravelin's atmosphere like a thrown brick with a vendetta. Alien observers watched from orbit, screens filled with static, heat signatures, and lines of human biometric data. 30 seconds after landing, the feed cut out. For 6 hours, silence. Then, a single message beamed back. Howdy from hell. Nest cleared. Bring snacks. Confused, the aliens sent a drone. The footage revealed a battlefield littered with Rarmal corpses, some impaled on makeshift spears, others trapped in elaborate snares using their own body mucus. On one wall, painted in Rarmal ichor, was the phrase, "Bless your heart." Marla stood beside the wreckage, helmet off, sipping from a metal flask. When the drone approached, she looked straight at it and waved. "Told y'all we brought fireworks." She winked. The council convened immediately. Emergency protocols were triggered. Internal debates raged about the moral implications of using humans. Gum simply exhaled spores and muttered, "Told you." Later that day, Zethkar found himself walking the perimeter of Kesser Prime, brooding in the acidic rain. His second-in-command, a slimy quadruped named Trill, approached nervously. "They say the humans subdued an entire Rarmal brood, without a single casualty." Zethkar grimaced. "Yes. And they left a pie on the Rarmal matriarch's corpse. Still warm." Trill hesitated. "Should I alert the culinary division?" "No," Zethkar growled. "Alert the theologians. We may need new gods." Back in the human quarters, Marla tossed a Rarmal claw onto the table with a satisfying clack. Her team roared in laughter. Someone opened a bottle of bootleg Earth whiskey, and the women swapped stories about who'd scared the Rarmal scouts worse. Private Lee recounted how she whispered nursery rhymes into her radio while stalking the enemy. "I think one of them actually wet its carapace." Marla nodded approvingly. "See? Fear's just the seasoning on a well-cooked victory." They all laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh you hear in bars. It was deeper. Sharper. Out in the hallway, 2 alien engineers passed by and stopped at the door listening. Inside, Marla's voice dropped to a low, even tone. "You know what I love about this gig? They brought us here thinking we'd be their monsters." A pause. Then, calmly, "They don't know we brought our own." She raised her glass. To friendly faces and full control. The door slid shut behind them. Out in the hall, the engineers stared at each other. "We should report this?" The other shook its head. "We should run." And far above in the council chambers, Gum pressed a slow, spore-dusted finger to the screen replaying Marla's grin. "Smile sharper than plasma," he murmured. "And twice as fatal." The story, for now, was only beginning. The Rarmal swarm had a unique method of surrendering. They didn't. Their species had no linguistic structure for capitulation, no cultural equivalent to mercy. They fought until their exoskeletons shattered, or until consumed by their own kind in ritual defeat. For 7 centuries, this trait had terrified every known civilization. Then came the humans. Specifically, the women of the Human Advance Unit. Though the Galactic Empire refused to call them soldiers, preferring the sanitized term human assets, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the pattern unfolding across war zones. Every system where Captain Marla Briggs and her team were deployed became quiet within 48 hours. Not pacified. Silent. Rarmal hives went dark. Not a single distress signal. Not a single trace of movement. High Lord Zethkar stared at the strategic map of Sector 9D, the planetary grids blipping into inactive status like a series of extinguished candles. His expression, once carved from smug disdain, had soured into a kind of professional dread. He muttered to himself, "They're not winning battles. They're erasing them." From across the command table, Grand Admiral Ixil tilted his lumpy, spined head. "I don't understand how they're doing it. The women are outnumbered, underarmed, and only marginally trained in Imperial combat protocol." Lord Priest Gum offered no reply. Instead, he slid a data crystal onto the table. The other leaders watched as the hologram bloomed into grainy footage from a salvaged helmet cam. It began with an ambush. Human Team Delta 6, pinned down in the trenches of Gale Tarfor, surrounded by Rarmal berserkers. The swarm launched themselves with terrifying speed. Marla's voice came over the comms. "Ladies, if we could wrap this up before dinner, I'd be just thrilled." Another voice, Corporal Jasmine Poe, cracked with amusement. "Got a pot roast on slow-cooked Cap?" "Sure do. Apple glazed. Set it before we left orbit." Then came the scream of gunfire. But not Imperial plasma or beam pulses. The women were using jury-rigged flamethrowers, repurposed mining drills, a shotgun that sounded like it had been handcrafted in someone's garage. And they moved like dancers, fluid, grinning, exchanging polite instructions in the middle of carnage. "Sugar, they're flanking left." "Thank you kindly, darling. I'll handle 'em." Marla Briggs fired a smoke grenade into the air, the canister labeled "Y'all sit tight now" in red cursive. The Rarmal charged blindly into the cloud, and emerged into silence. The feed cut to black. Ixil turned slowly to Gum. "Is this real?" Gum nodded. "That's not the disturbing part." The next clip showed the aftermath. Rows of Rarmal warriors curled into fetal position, weeping. Some were tied up. Some weren't, but didn't move. One repeated a single phrase in broken trade common. "She sang while she gutted my brother." Zethkar rubbed his jaw. "They're using psychological warfare." "No," Gum said. "They're using hospitality as psychological warfare." It sounded absurd until you remembered the footage of Marla offering cookies to surrendering Rarmal commanders, or the time Sergeant Cruz negotiated a ceasefire by delivering a homemade peach cobbler laced with nerve-calming pollen. To alien minds, human politeness was unreadable. Was the smile genuine? Was the phrase "darling" affectionate or threatening? What did "bless your heart" mean in a military context? The Empire didn't know. The Rarmal certainly didn't. Meanwhile, aboard the human deployment ship Maggie Sue, morale was obscenely high. Marla Briggs strolled through the mess hall, wearing a blood-stained apron and humming something suspiciously close to Jolene. Her crew relaxed, legs propped up, polishing weapons while swapping gossip. One of them was painting nail polish onto her combat knife. "All right, girls," Marla called. "Time for our debrief." The women gathered around a projector in the briefing room, where a hologram of the next target, a Rarmal bioforge on planet Hisek, rotated slowly. Marla pointed. "Hive structure, 7 entry points, heavily guarded. Intel says they're manufacturing swarm eggs faster than we can torch them." Private Lee raised a hand. "So we're doing the thing again?" "Yup," Marla replied. "You charm the guards, I set the charges, and Val does her creepy whisper thing over the comms." Val grinned. "I've got a new one. It's from an Earth cartoon. Goes like this. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. Think it'll rattle 'em?" Marla chuckled. "Sweetie, it rattled me." Sergeant Cruz leaned forward. "Any chance we're getting resupplied with actual gear?" Marla poured herself a cup of coffee from an old tin pot. "Nope. Empire's still pretending we're a pilot program. Which means all we get is duct tape, gumption, and whatever explosive chemicals I can scrape off their floor tiles." Nobody complained. It was getting harder to pretend this was just about war. On Hisek, the Rarmal were waiting. The bioforge towered above the jungle canopy, a structure of organic bone and writhing tissue. The guards, heavily armed, scanned the perimeter nervously. They'd heard the stories. The soft ones. The ones that didn't scream. The women didn't arrive with ships or gunfire. They walked out of the forest, dragging coolers and folding chairs. Marla stepped forward and laid out a checkered picnic blanket in front of the Rarmal gates. Hello there, she called. We brought snacks. The Rarmal opened fire. It did not go well for them. 3 hours later, the forge was burning. Human laughter echoed through the forest. On a tree, someone had nailed a sign. Thanks for having us. Let's do brunch next time. The Empire was running out of excuses. Zethkar called an emergency assembly. Ladies and gentlethings, he said, grimacing as he stared at the casualty charts. We may have miscalculated. They're effective, Gum said simply. They're insane, Ixil countered. They hold tea parties in active war zones. The Rarmal are beginning to retreat on sight, another counselor added. Some hives are self-immolating to avoid capture. The room went silent. Then Zethkar asked, Do we know what Earth trained these women to do? They didn't. No official records had been provided. The humans had only said they were volunteers. Their files were scrubbed, their tactics unorthodox, their tools improvised and unpredictable. Worse still, they weren't just winning battles, they were gathering data. Each strike ended with strange sensor readings, environmental scans, and the occasional drone left behind to quietly monitor alien reactions. Gum voiced what the others were afraid to say. They're studying us. That night on the Maggie Sue, Marla wrote in her private journal. She didn't keep digital logs. She used a leather-bound book, her pen looping in elegant cursive. Day 93. Operation Mockingbird continues as expected. Empire still oblivious. Rarmal are cracking. Our girls are adapting faster than predicted. Psychological dominance achieved ahead of schedule. Still no word from Earth Command, but I assume radio silence is protocol. We're improvising well. They think we're the monsters. Good. Better than being underestimated. She paused, sipped her coffee, and underlined a single word. Leverage. The next morning, an alien delegation requested a tour of the humans' facilities, hoping to understand their methods. Marla welcomed them with cornbread and smiles. She answered every question with charming vagueness, and the kind of warmth that made it hard to argue. When asked about Earth's military doctrine, she replied, Oh, we just do what comes naturally. When asked how she keeps morale high, she said, Lotta singing. Sometimes we arm wrestle. Sometimes we crochet. Keeps the blood pressure down. The delegates left with full bellies and hollow stares. One of them mumbled, I think I just confessed my war crimes to a woman baking muffins. Meanwhile, the whispers began to spread. Among the Rarmal, they called her the soft death. Among the Empire, she became known as the Southern strategist. Even within her team, there were questions. Private Lee approached her late one evening, hesitating. Cap, she said quietly, do you ever feel like we're not just winning? Like, we're setting something up? Marla didn't look up from her paperwork. Darlin', you ever heard of possum hunting? Lee blinked. I don't think so. You don't shoot the possum right away. You leave food out. You let it get comfortable. You make sure it trusts the trap. Then one night, when it's nice and fat and real sure of itself, snap. Lee swallowed hard. Marla finally met her eyes, and for a moment, the warmth vanished. We're not here to win their war, sugar. We're here to end it. On our terms. That was the thing about Marla Briggs. She never yelled. She never threatened. But when she went quiet, the room got cold. On the planet Virex, the final test unfolded. A heavily fortified Rarmal breeding citadel. 10,000 soldiers. Biocannons. Force barriers. Imperial tacticians advised against the human deployment. Marla deployed anyway. 12 hours later, the Empire received one message. It was a photo. The citadel burning. Marla standing on the corpse of the Rarmal matriarch, holding a cup of tea. No casualties. All human operatives accounted for. Attached was a handwritten note. Next time, maybe ask before you assume we're the sidekicks. The council broke into chaos. Zethkar smashed his claws against the table. They're too dangerous. We must terminate the program. Gum simply asked, Can you? The question hung there, unanswered. Back aboard Maggie Sue, Marla gathered her team. Ladies, she said softly. You've done good work. But now comes the hard part. Cruz leaned forward. Which is? We stopped smiling. The women straightened. The Empire's starting to ask questions, Marla continued. Time to show him that politeness? That was the leash. She drew a line through her next objective, a summit with Imperial command. Now, she said, voice steel under velvet, we teach him what happens when the leash comes off. The lights dimmed. And somewhere on the edge of space, the galaxy shivered. Aboard the Imperial flagship Ossidian Star, the Grand Conference Chamber shimmered with artificial light and suppressed tension. The walls, laced with sound-dampening crystal, were built to mute out war. That morning, it did not work. Explosions rumbled in the distance. Distant starports burned with the kind of chaos only a losing empire could inspire. Zethkar was not used to being afraid. He had survived 17 succession wars, a coup by his own egg clutch, and a love affair with a sentient asteroid. But as he watched the holograms of Rarmal forces surrendering en masse, not to the Empire, but to smiling, unarmed human women, he felt something alien crawl down his spine. It might have been a tremor. Or guilt. Or both. Admiral Ixil hovered beside him, many limbs twitching with uncertainty. 3 more sectors fell overnight. The humans didn't fire a single shot. They walked in. Zethkar rasped. They offered scones. Across the chamber, a comms panel buzzed. A junior officer approached. We have the human captain requesting audience. Zethkar bristled. Did you invite her? No, High Lord. She invited herself. The doors opened before permission was granted. Marla Briggs stepped inside like she owned the air, her boots echoing against the polished obsidian floor. She wore no armor, no weapons, just that infuriating calm, and a blue sundress patterned with little earth birds. Her hair was tied back, lipstick flawless, demeanor unbothered. Hope I'm not interrupting, she said, smiling. Zethkar stood slowly, expression unreadable. Captain Briggs. She corrected him gently. Commander now, actually. Promotions happen fast when the job market's on fire. Ixil hissed softly. You're out of uniform. Oh, this is my uniform now. You wouldn't believe how breathable this fabric is. Marla didn't sit. She circled the table, eyes scanning the room with interest, like a hostess inspecting someone else's kitchen before redecorating. We've been watching your council meetings, she continued. You're scared. That's good. Means you're paying attention. Zethkar stiffened. We brought your people here as auxiliaries. Now you're leading planetary takeovers. Marla stopped beside him, her voice dipping an octave. You didn't bring us. You unleashed us. There's a difference. Gum, seated farther back, leaned forward. What is your true objective, Commander Briggs? The smile remained. It was never about the Rarmal. A silence settled in like a fog. Marla walked to the center of the chamber. You needed monsters and we obliged. But humans don't fight wars just for fun anymore. Not unless there's a bigger prize. You invited us in, hoping we'd spill blood on your behalf. And we did. But along the way we realized something. This galaxy's already conquered. Ixil chittered. By who? She looked him in the eye. By nobody. And that's the problem. You people rule with claws and decrees, but there's no heart in it. No vision. No strategy. You're coasting on dead empires and fossilized arrogance. Zethkar growled. So your people intend to replace us? No, Marla said, tilting her head. We intend to fix you. Whether you want us to or not. The admission landed with the weight of gravity. No bluster. No shouting. Just cold certainty from someone who'd already planned 3 moves ahead. Zethkar stepped toward her. What are you? Marla didn't flinch. I'm a teacher, sugar. And your galaxy's overdue for summer school. Outside the ship, more systems fell into silence. The Rarmal stopped attacking. Not because they were defeated, but because they'd begun worshipping the humans as mythic figures. One hive built a shrine to Sergeant Cruz, labeling her the Smiling Flame. Another declared Private Lee a fertility icon, based on an incident involving a flamethrower and an aphrodisiac mist they had never quite recovered from. Human transmissions flooded galactic channels, music, recipes, bedtime stories told in warm, even tones that made hardened warriors twitch. Beneath the surface of this charm offensive lay something darker. In a secret facility hidden inside a hollowed moon, alien scientists were dissecting the data they'd been collecting on the human team. A crustacean xenopsychologist named Trin clicked nervously as he scrubbed through logs. He'd cracked their encryption 2 weeks ago, and had been reading ever since. They weren't just taking out Rarmal nests. They were mapping logistics networks, supply chains, leadership hierarchies. Every location the women visited now operated more efficiently, with better morale, improved infrastructure. The humans weren't fighting. They were governing. And the worst part? The locals preferred it. Trin backed away from the console and whispered, "They're not soldiers. They're colonizers in pearls." Then he ran. Back on the Maggie Sue, the mood had shifted. Gone were the chaotic potlucks and karaoke nights. The women moved with tighter focus. Weapons were cleaned with religious regularity. Maps of Imperial supply lines hung in the command center. There was a quiet precision to every motion. Corporal Poe watched Marla pin new photos to the wall. Portraits of Imperial Council members, planetary governors, media influencers. "Cap," Poe said carefully. "This feels different." Marla nodded. "It is. Are we still following Earth Command?" Marla paused. "We were never not following it." There was a long, humming silence. Then Poe asked, "And the rest of the galaxy?" Marla turned, soft eyes suddenly unreadable. "Still interviewing." That night, a secure transmission came through from Earth. Marla took it alone. The face that appeared was of an older woman, with a matronly voice and eyes like twin razors. "You've exceeded objectives," the woman said. "Secondary initiative is greenlit. Proceed with Operation Glasshouse." Marla gave a slow nod. "Understood. Any adjustments?" 1. The Empire is onto you. Accelerate the collapse. Controlled chaos. Frame it like liberation. "Of course," Marla said. "Wouldn't want anyone thinking we were the bad guys." The screen blinked off. 2 days later, Imperial media channels were hijacked. A woman's voice, not threatening, not angry, filled the comms. "Hi there," it began. "This is Commander Marla Briggs. I'd like to talk about hospitality." What followed was a masterclass in soft power warfare. She told stories about baking pies during hurricanes, about negotiating family drama at Thanksgiving, about finding peace in chaos. But between the lines, she mapped a revolution. Instructions slipped into metaphors. Codes disguised as recipes. Tactical coordinates wrapped in Sunday school lessons. By the end of the broadcast, entire sectors had rebelled. Some leaders surrendered just to get her to stop talking. Zethkar watched from the council chamber, fists clenched. "This is treason." Gum offered no argument. "This is humanity." Marla's team moved swiftly now. Not with guns, but with processes. They replaced broken systems with functioning ones. Introduced education, health reforms, even fair elections. All while smiling. All while maintaining the illusion of helpful guests. Until one by one, planetary governors were replaced, not with soldiers, but with advisors. Friendly. Efficient. In control. Zethkar attempted a counterstrike. He sent an elite assassination team to eliminate Marla and her core officers. They infiltrated the Maggie Sue under cloak, weapons drawn, expectations high. They didn't make it past the lobby. What the assassins found wasn't a war room, but a tea party. The human women sat at a long table, sipping tea and playing cards. Marla didn't look up. "I see y'all brought your own silverware," she said. "That's cute." Within minutes, the assassins surrendered. One even asked for the biscuit recipe. The report never made it back to the Empire. It didn't need to. Word traveled faster than plasma. Marla stood on the bridge one evening, watching the stars with a quiet satisfaction. Sergeant Cruz approached. The Empire's unraveling. Marla nodded. Told them not to hand us the knife. Think they'll try to fight back? Oh, sugar. They already did. They just didn't realize the war started with our smile. A new alert pinged on the console. Another system requesting aid. Another population asking for human assistance. Cruz raised an eyebrow. You gonna send more girls? Marla tapped her fingers against the railing. No. We're gonna send trainers. Let's teach the locals how to bake and build, and govern. Empire's done. It just hasn't hit the floor yet. As the Maggie Sue cruised quietly toward its next target, excuse me, partner world, the galaxy trembled beneath its own weight, unsure whether it had been saved or subjugated. In truth, it was both. And the monsters it had invited in? They just started decorating. The imperial capital, Jarthas, had once gleamed like a jewel in the void, gleaming towers of alloy and crystal spiraling above a lush atmosphere, a seat of power that had never seen war on its soil. Now, a haze of smoke hung in the sky like a bruise, and citizens whispered human names like curses, or prayers. The last council session convened in a makeshift underground chamber, hastily converted from a luxury wine vault. Every screen showed different disasters, Rarmal defectors pledging loyalty to Earth's provisional governors, entire sectors renaming themselves protectorates, humans shaking hands and planting flags. Do we even have a standing navy anymore? Admiral Ixil asked, his voice hollow. No, rasped Zethkar. Most of it surrendered. To Earth. To her, he corrected. To Marla Briggs. The name no longer required explanation. It had become shorthand for submission wrapped in courtesy, for conquest with a smile. Her face had replaced statues of emperors in dozens of captured cities. A dangerous thing, they'd realized too late. She didn't want worship. She wanted order. And she was building it, one polite invasion at a time. She's coming here next, Gum said, his spores unusually dim. You all know that. She won't attack Jarthas, Ixil said, grasping for fantasy. No, Zethkar agreed. She'll walk in the front door. They were right. At sunrise the next day, without a single escort or weapon, Marla Briggs stepped off a civilian freighter and onto the tarmac of the imperial capital's diplomatic runway. She wore pressed slacks, a tailored blazer, and carried a floral tote bag. Her stride was easy. Her eyes were not. Reporters, soldiers, dignitaries, protesters, none dared touch her. They watched her pass as if she were a force of nature. She stopped only once, to give a lost child directions to the nearest shelter. The footage went viral before she reached the city gates. She didn't storm the palace. She hosted a town hall. Within hours, thousands gathered, crammed into an old amphitheater once used for executions. Marla stood center stage with a single microphone and no security. Hi there, she said, to a hush thick with fear and curiosity. My name's Marla. I'm here to talk. And talk she did. Not of war, not of conquest. She spoke of clean water, stable government, power grids that didn't collapse in windstorms. She told stories about how Earth had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and clawed its way back each time by sheer grit and bad decisions made with conviction. She described bureaucracy with humor, diplomacy with charm, and ended with a simple statement. We're not here to rule. We're here to fix. Some cried. Some clapped. Some walked out. The Empire's response came 12 hours later, when Zethkar activated Omega Protocol 9, the last desperate failsafe, planetary lockdown, mass detainment, and a targeted strike on the Maggie Sue. The order never reached its destination. Marla was already in the palace. She'd arrived politely. Zethkar stood when she entered the throne chamber. Not out of respect, but because it felt wrong not to. The guards didn't stop her. They stood back, as if repelled by something too refined to oppose. You've violated every treaty we've ever signed, Zethkar said coldly. I've rewritten them, Marla said, brushing imaginary dust from her lapel. You're welcome. You've staged a coup. I've staged a correction. Zethkar stepped forward, eyes burning. Do you know what we sacrificed to hold this galaxy together? Marla looked up at the massive stained glass above them, still depicting the Empire's origin in abstract, heroic shapes. Yes, she said. You sacrificed everyone else. He snarled. And you think humans are better? She didn't answer immediately. She turned, walked the length of the chamber slowly, as if measuring it for new drapes. No, sugar. I don't think we're better. I think we're worse. But we know it. That's what makes us dangerous. She turned back to him. We survived every apocalypse we ever made. Do you think it was luck? It was adaptation. We don't conquer with might. We conquer with manners. You mistook civility for weakness. That's your first mistake. And the second? You let us in. At that moment, the chamber doors burst open, not with soldiers, but with civilians. Planetary administrators, military commanders, trade officials, all wearing sashes in earth blue. They didn't shout. They handed over documentation. Signed agreements. Petitions. The Empire had already surrendered. Zethkar's knees buckled slightly. You poisoned them. No, Marla said gently. I fed them. Something your regime never did. He charged her then. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps madness. Perhaps the final flicker of imperial ego. She stepped aside with effortless grace. He stumbled past, caught off balance. She placed one hand lightly on his back and pushed. Not hard, just enough to guide his fall. He crashed to his knees. I'm not your executioner, she said quietly. That's not our way. But your trial starts at noon. Wear something humble. She turned and left him kneeling. Back on the Maggie Sue, celebrations were quiet. Not because they weren't deserved, but because everyone understood the gravity of what they'd done. Sergeant Cruz sat with a drink, staring at the stars. Lee asked, Is it over? Marla, sipping tea at the helm, said, No, baby. It's never over. Poe leaned against the railing. So what now? Marla smiled. We civilize. And they did. The months that followed became a blueprint. Earth didn't declare itself ruler. It became administrator. The galaxy reorganized, not under flags but under service charters. Education programs replaced loyalty oaths. Humans taught agriculture, urban planning, arbitration. They brought in therapists, economists, chefs. Some rebelled. They were met not with bullets, but bureaucrats. With supply embargoes and very firm letters beginning with, Dear esteemed sir. And Marla? She declined every formal title. She was simply Commander Briggs, Ambassador at Large, sometimes called the Iron Hostess. One day, during a tour of the rebuilt city of Maraxa, a child asked her, Are you the Empress now? Marla knelt to eye level, her smile soft. No, sweetheart. Empresses rule with fear. I rule with expectations. Then she rose and kept walking. Her legacy spread, not like a plague, but like a recipe, shared, adapted, baked into cultures. A little Earth in every colony. A new normal, where dinner invitations could be more terrifying than threats, and a kind woman with a clipboard could topple a regime. She was polite. Until provoked. And once provoked? Well, she redecorated the galaxy.